think back to your arcade days, there were games that really just got you hooked into gaming. And for me, some of the best arcade memories are games like NBA Jam and NFL Blitz. I remember being there with my friends, going crazy, which team we were going to pick in NBA Jam, what was going to be your two-player lineup. It was so much fun. Adam Boyes is going to stop by. Adam spent a lot of time at EA, at Midway, at Sony, at Capcom, and he got to learn the ins and outs from people that have been there before. He has some great stories. If you think about those arcade game days, they were some of the best that were out there in gaming. This was a super cool conversation. I really appreciate Adam for joining us, and we're going to kick it off and hand it to him.
Absolutely. Thanks for the intro, Greg. Very, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been an amazing journey in my career, 29 years, a very diverse background, starting quality assurance, making $5 an hour, I think 5.50 an hour when I started in QA tester, but variety of different challenges and games that I've worked on throughout my career. So I'm excited to dig into some of those stories, some of the lessons that I've learned along the way, and talk more about the state of the industry.
First game you worked on was QA on NBA Live 97, I think.
Yes, it was. Yeah, very briefly, and then quickly on to Live 98 PC. I remember my formative time. I remember being NBA Live 98 on
Okay.
PC. Yeah.
So NBA Live didn't always have the best track record. We know 2K came in and kind of wiped the floor and took over NBA for a few years. When you're QAing a game that may have a lot of bugs or isn't polished, like, do you know when you're playing it that something's not clicking here?
You usually do. I mean, at that time, I think NBA Live was the top of the pops, right? NBA 2K hadn't even come out yet. I don't think in
Yeah, I guess we're that
'98.
early. In 99,
Yeah, so it was
99 would
very,
be
very early.
Dreamcast.
And it was also sort of like just right after the era of 3D polygons, right? The transition from sprites to 3D polys was just underway. So if I look back at footage of those old games, they definitely look like they've aged a bit. But I remember just the pride of trying to find bugs, and then showing them to developers, and then asking them if they're going to fix them. And it was almost like a quest to find shippable bugs, of bugs that they're like, that's not a big deal, and you're like, what? But it crashes the game, when you simulate it after you create 1,000 characters, and like, no one's going to do that. I was like, what are you talking about? Right. But you do have a sense of, as the game progresses. And back then, by the way, Greg, you got to remember, we didn't even have PCs. So we had PCs to test on, but if you were a console tester at the time, you did not have a PC to log your bugs. So everyone had scratch pads and pencils, and so you had to write down all your bugs manually. And then you booked time at this one terminal on the team to sit down with your 3.5-inch floppy and put it in and write down and type all your bugs in Notepad, and then submit that to your lead, who would then copy and paste it all into the central bug database and would do regression testing of like, oh, search for bugs to see if they've been done before. So a very different era if you think about nowadays, where everyone's got a PC at their station. So imagine a world where you don't even have a work PC at your workplace.
Do you have a feeling about how AI is? Obviously, it's going to help improve certain things in the industry and it can help hurt other things in the industry, but I'm curious on where your kind of stance is.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many multifaceted aspects of what AI can and can't do. And I think our industry often sort of takes a theme or a topic and then tries to dictate on how everyone should feel about it. I think AI is very nuanced. And when I think about my olden days job, like, I now have seen tools, Greg, where you could just basically be playing the game while it's auto capturing everything you're doing. And then you could be talking along with the gameplay and saying, okay, bug number one, this is what was happening. And if it's transcribing my input plus the game state, plus saving that clip out, and then uploading that to the side, and then auto sort of like putting that bug in the database, think about how much more effective I could have been as someone finding those bugs. And especially with the developer now, they have the context of, they can look in the code base of see exactly where the state was in the background in the code. And then they can also look at the visuals of the video to see the context. Like, all that stuff you'd have to literally go into an engineer's office and try to replicate the bug on the controller in their office. And if you try it for a couple hours, and if you couldn't do it properly. But nowadays, I think tools will make us more efficient in that way. And I think it's very important for us to designate and talk about the impact of AI on the beneficial side of things, with also understanding that, that was not replacing a job. That was just, my job was slower back then. And now I can do it more effective and efficient. So I could find more bugs and be more scalable. So I kind of feel like AI used the correct way can almost be like our Iron Man suits, right?
Mhm.
Where now we can get up and we can be more powerful and we can use tools and technologies and be more quick and efficient with communication.
You have been part of some of the coolest companies I remember growing up from my childhood. I started gaming on NES, but Sega was my real first one. And back then, you saw a lot of Midway. You saw a lot of EA. I mean, you still see a lot of EA, right? So let's start at Midway because some of my favorite video game memories are from Midway. So I remember growing up playing Rush. I remember playing Blitz. I remember playing NBA Jam, Mortal Kombat. We're all part of this Midway family. And
He's on fire.
yeah, right. I mean, we
Boom
talk.
shakalaka. I
These are
mean,
games
yeah,
like we
that's
talk
right.
about on a weekly basis, not even with this podcast, because they're just so memorable. And it's like,
Yeah.
all right, we're gonna buy an arcade unit. My friends are either they're gonna play the golf one, or they want NBA Jam. Like that's what they want. But I'm curious, like, what was your role at Midway? How did you get started, and what were the types of games you were working on there?
Yeah, it was a cool opportunity. I was working at an external development studio called Next Level Games up in Vancouver, Canada, where I was born and raised in Abbotsford, which is a little bit outside of Vancouver. But we were doing a contract project called NHL Hits Pro for Midway. And so I was a QA manager at the time. And I was starting to dabble at the end of the project with production. I was like, oh, Nigel Franks was this awesome guy who's still in the games industry today, was our producer, and he was teaching me a lot about production and what that's like. And so when the project ended, they didn't have another project for me to go on to, so my contract expired. And so our producer from Chicago called me up and said, hey Adam, would you like to move to Chicago? You can move down here and you can be an associate producer. I was like, that sounds amazing. And then, even as a 20 something year old, trying to understand what a relocation is, when you've only ever lived, in Vancouver. Um, so I got to relocate to Chicago. And when I got there, we were making the sequel, NHL Hits Pro 2. And within my first week, Greg, they canceled our project. So right out the gate, I'm like, I don't know what I'm on. And they're like, hey, you have got a lot of sports experience because I'd worked at EA in QA. And they're like, we're making this game called Slugfest, loaded. And so you're going to be on the baseball game. And I was like, I did a little bit of testing on triple play baseball back at EA. But what was crazy about it is that transition from like EA was a big company, all the big, fancy execs you would see upstairs, because they put QA in the basement, where I was like, oh, look at all the fancy people upstairs. Midway was just like a bunch of different teams. But I remember the first time I caught a glimpse of Mark Turmel, and I was like, that's Mark Turmel. He made Smash TV. He made Robotron. And then you're like, that's George Gomez. He made Spy Hunter. And then you're like, that's Ed Boon. He made Mortal Kombat. And you just see these people around. That's Sal DeVita, and they made sort of Blitz and NBA Jam together. So it was so cool for me, Greg, as like an absolute massive gamer growing up, is just seeing these people walk among us and then being able to interact with them and talk to them. And eventually I moved my way up to, after Slugfest loaded, shipped, I worked then on Blitz the League, which was our unlicensed football game when EA gobbled up the Madden EA license, the NFL license exclusively. We pivoted. We got Lawrence Taylor to be on the cover. But at that point, I was a producer and then senior producer on that project. And then my third project, I was exec producer, which was crazy because then I was peers with some of these people, with guys like George Gomez that I looked up to my whole career. So I just look back and I just spent some time with George Gomez and Ed Boon and Mike Builder and Dave Lang, some of the OGs from Midway. And it was just such a formative time for me. I feel very lucky and blessed that I was there during that time. And I was able to juxtapose my EA training, right? EA was very prim, very proper, very process oriented. And Midway was just sort of like abject chaos. So juxtaposing those two as my first couple of big roles in the games industry was phenomenal. But their attention to detail and specificity and control and frame rates and just the feeling of the controller taught me so much that I took forward in my career. Well, I think we go back to craftsmanship. Imagine a world where what they would do, what George and Ed and Mark would tell me stories of, is they would go to an arcade in Chicago, and they would basically, in the morning before it opened, they would swap out a board with three changes, right, with three little bug fixes or tweaks, and then they would sit there, unbeknownst to the people playing it, and they would sit there with a notepad and take notes and their feedback. And so what I learned from them was this absolute, just their key details of every single thing from the field. Because you, at the time, the original microtransactions were quarters, right? How do you get that next quarter? What's the right amount of time for a play session? How to get people to feel great about their accomplishments, not too punishing when it's like put in the next quarter. And so their attention to detail of like, again, what the hands-on controller felt like is critical. Playable build every single day. And to this day, I still sort of mandate that in all the projects that I'm involved in. I want a playable build that we can sort of fire up on a regular basis. We're all playing it together. But the other part, Greg, that I didn't understand or really put a lot of thought into is that dopamine, the feeling of like, how are we going to make people feel great? Like we had this years long training of Sal and Mark are teaching us, when you earn something in a game, what does the bar look like? When that bar fills, what is the animation that pops? And then how does it fly into the turbo or the on fire or any of that stuff? And so pixel language and feedback loop. And so between the hands-on controller feeling that everything has to feel very fresh, very vibrant, and very present. And I absolutely agree with you that some of these games, I think, that just already have the tool set there, the ability to tweak and perfect all those different parts, because all of them became almost so hyper fixated. And even to this, I remember one time somebody put in, well, years and years later when MK was on console, and they put in a 1.5 frame, I think, or 2 frame delay. So instead of it running at 60 FPS, it was 58. And Ed was like, "This is not 60." And like, because again, that training of what exactly they feel and how they want to express themselves. So I do agree with you that absolute fascination and determination around every little detail, I don't see that on a lot of teams. It would make games even longer and larger and more expensive. But man, when there were smaller teams and you could just tighten it with that specificity, and it was pretty something magical to watch. I learned so much from all those guys.
Let's talk about Capcom for a little bit. There was one game that, well, first of all, Capcom makes a lot of games that are fantastic, but Dreamcast came out. I remember getting a demo CD, and there was a game Power Stone and Power Stone 2. And most people don't remember Power Stone when I'm talking to them about it. And it's just like, it was like this 4 person fight them. You could pick up anything on a level. Like, it was wild. And I don't know if it was like Smash Brothers. It's not, because Smash Brothers is 2D, but like Power Stone 2 came out, and then it just never came out again. I'm just like, what happened there? But that's neither here nor there. What were you doing at Capcom?
So Capcom joined as head of production. So we were basically in charge in the US of figuring out Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network. How do we take the amazing, amount of games, the library of content that we have as a platform, and bring it to a new generation? And so I had the absolute amazing job of looking at all the old code and then finding studios that could remaster, remake, and no one had really done that yet, right? You got to think about that era, right? So we're talking about 2000, so it's 2007, and the first project that we greenlit was Street Fighter 2 HD remake, and so that was obviously a big undertaking because we're going to hand draw every single frame from a game that was like Capcom to me growing up. That was my holy mackerel. Like Mega Man, all of the Mega Man franchise series were phenomenal, and I was buying a Commando, the original one. So all these, so it was such an honor to basically build a team to go and scour the earth for the games and figure out which ones made the most sense. Puzzle Fighter HD Remix, that was a ton of fun as well. But so we were in charge of bringing games back and bringing them back on the digital front. And I think at peak, we had 6 of the top 10 selling games on XBLA and PSN. Not because we created them from scratch. It's more because we were inspired by the incredible games that Capcom had made through the years.
It's the nostalgia factor, especially doing it from the beginning where you are, is ridiculous. There's a guy, kind of Colin Neese. I don't know if you've seen him online. He does mind game data, and he talks about, like, for example, NCAA last year came out, right, and you saw this crazy boost in everything because people haven't seen NCAA in 20 years, and now year 2, you see that boost just completely get eliminated, right? Like, there's something about that being able to play games from the past, and especially when you talk about the Street Fighters, people grew up on that. People like died playing Street Fighter. So you tap into that nostalgia really well, I think, and especially being that first mover, it's like it gets everyone excited, and I think we're going to see that, and then I think it's going to be worn out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I realized I'd never realized that I had a massive bias. And one of my favorite games in the arcade is a really obscure arcade game that Capcom made called Black Tiger. I was always super fascinated with it. Uh, it was what inspired like Rygar and a few other those side scrolling sort of action games back in the day. But I was hell bent, Greg, on bringing that IP back. And so we did survey after survey, research after research. And it was like 65th place, 63rd place. No one cared, but I really wanted to push it through. I realized though that Puzzle Fighter in 1943 and all these other Bionic Commando, Mega Man, these are the games that people want to bring back. No one wants to see Black Tiger come back. But also, I think we were entering a new era because as we were working on those IPs, we were also in charge of doing business development and finding new projects to greenlight. And so one of the first games we ever greenlit was a game from Certain Affinity. So Max Hoberman had left Bungie. He was the online lead online designer of the Halo series from I think 2 and maybe even 3, and the original. Super brilliant guy, and they had this game called Age of Booty, which is just this fun little hex-based pirate game, sort of like a bit of an RTS, but really simple and straightforward. And we were trying to basically find what's the new next generation of Capcom original games. So that was one of the games we signed. Another one was called Rocketman. And so exploring that, and I remember at the time, because we were getting pitched all kinds of games, I remember seeing Limbo. We're the first people that ever saw Limbo before Microsoft signed it. I remember passing on Minecraft because I was like, I don't get it. So but these are the things that you start to learn of, like, oh, the game industry is changing and tastes are evolving. And even though I'm old school and I love my, Mega Man, Bionic Commando, and Black Tiger, the players of this next generation want different tastes.
You have so much industry experience from so many different cool people, and I'm curious on how that all translates into what Vivratio is doing and how you're trying to share that as best practices with others in the industry.
Yeah, it's a great question. What I realize is that the change happening in the industry is sort of cataclysmic. I don't think it's ever changed as much as it's changing right now. And so the more people that I started to ask, what do they think the number one problem is, the different answers that I got. And that was kind of a shocking uh, thing to me of how are we not identifying what the key issues are and trying to tackle them. So with that, I realized that we often rely on outside of the industry advice from big sort of consultancies. So I had this idea, and over the past 7 months since I began, I've been scouring the earth and talking to hundreds of people all throughout the industry and trying to find other like-minded individuals. And so we're super excited because I've brought on 9 other team members that are going to help us tackle these problems. There's a lot of areas that I have a ton of experience in. There's a lot of areas that I don't. And realize that in order for us to impact change and help these big companies, publishers, platforms, investors tackle the problems that they're facing, we need a very diverse sort of mindset and superhero suite, right? So that's what we've been doing with finding these people, and being able to be all operator centric, right? So everyone's shipped things, done things, launched platforms. That's critically important because then you understand the context of it. It's like, imagine somebody telling you how to play a game that they've never played before, or that they've never even played a game or picked up a controller, right? We should be giving and getting advice from people that have done it before as well. Not because I think we're going to repeat ourselves, right? But the industry is cyclical. So what Vivratio's mission is to help drive this industry with the heart and soul in mind to a more stable future where we have longevity sort of top of mind with the future of the games industry.
What are the size studios that you're typically approaching, and how do these studios? I'm going to take a look at myself here, right? I don't know
Sure.
how to ask for help or when to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people like that. They're just either gun shy or they're afraid to say, hey, I need some help. Like, how does a studio know they're in a place where, like, you know what? Help would help me right now.
I think, Greg, it's a human nature thing. Most people don't know how to ask for help or when to
Mhm.
ask for help. And oftentimes, I think when you do, you feel emasculated. You feel like, what am I doing? I'm not good enough. The reality of it is, no one knows what we're doing. None of us
Yeah.
know exactly what we're doing, right? Life is just a big sort of game of street theater and improv. And so we're figuring it out as we go. So I think that's a fantastic question because it's exactly the nut that I've been trying to crack of, like, how do you go to a studio and say, we can help, but they need to be ready to be helped. And so we've been exploring, and we're excited to talk more down the road about, like, creating products, or basically going in and being able to do review of their business and a check-in with them of, like, oh, here's some opportunities, here's some advice we would give you, and then they could take that and go on their way to sort of build the future. Or if they want more coaching and mentoring and stuff like that, that's an option too. But the first thing is really looking back And the question that I love opening a lot of my conversations with the studios is what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? When you started the studio, you had an idea. You wanted to make a game, or you wanted to do co-development, or you want to make a, RPG, whatever it is. But, how do you make them think deeper about the long term? Do you want to do this for your whole life? Do you want to do another? Is there another career in the future? Do you want to transition to other jobs or opportunities? So it's about helping guide them. But you hit the nail on the head, Greg. It's very difficult for people to ask for help if they don't know. So I think just giving opportunities, whether it's signing up, on LinkedIn, you can go up and sort of just sign up for 15 minutes to chat with me, just to sort of pick at what the problem set is.
Have you seen any common themes around struggles that studios have been facing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even from the questionnaire that I sent out, that we made this deck of cards, which is the biggest challenges of the games industry. So there's 52 different challenges. The big things I'm seeing right now, Greg, obviously funding sources, publishing platforms and investors are all spending less right now on new games and new concepts. People bringing their product to market. Do I sign with a publisher? Do I give a back end share? There's also discoverability. How do I get my game found? Oh, I didn't start building my community until too late. So by the way, there's dozens and dozens more, but those are some of the ones that I find the most that people discussing.
This is a tangent question, right?
Yeah.
Most of the times when I hear about problems in the industry, it's related to that. It's about marketing struggles. It's about community. Do I start doing this now? It's about trust and safety. Like, how can we never talk about the engineering or coding side of things when there's struggles in the game, right? Everyone always points to the community side of things, but what about the building of the game?
Well, because it's not very sexy, right? It's same question, Craig. Greg, people have asked me for years of, hey, why isn't there a reality show about making games? I was like, because most of it's like talking about where the code's going to be or what features going to be, or like it's just not. I mean, it can be dramatic, uh, but it is at the end of the day, you're sort of building widgets. I think finding the fun is the challenging part of any game development cycle. And the other part of it, it's kind of also why oftentimes our headlines don't talk about the contributing factors, and the headlines often don't talk about the solutions that we can pursue. We want that clickbait, right? We want that big, like, did you know? Gotcha, haha, this failed, this went under. That's what we're sort of drawn towards, because that's where human nature is like, oh, I'm curious what's going on with the drama between that publisher breaking up with that developer. And you're like, it's not really any of our business, even though it's exciting and it's interesting. But you're right. I wish we spent as an industry more time. But it also goes to like the relationship between the player and the developer. I think that's also fractured over time. I think players have opinions, right? And they can give their opinions on the regular. I think developers oftentimes take players for granted. And I think that relationship, it can be a little bit sort of delicate at times. But I think all of it is as long as we're all doing it in good conscience, and we're trying to do better and evolve, and as not only that relationship but the industry, I think we'll be in a better place.
Well, let's take a use case and kind of see if we can talk this out because it's
Sure.
my favorite use case in gaming and you have hands on experience with it. We're going to talk about No Man's Sky. You were at Sony. I think
Yeah.
you can talk about what your part was with No Man's Sky, but it was hyped beyond belief. It did not launch with hitting any much of that hype at all, but the game kept going. It was a little train that could, and it kept building, and it delivered on probably every one of those promises that it made, and then some. And it is a thriving game, and it is mind blowing knowing it came from. It's basically the phoenix, right? It came back from the ashes and rose. And I just love the story of the game because it's a true game developer that built it and loved it and wanted to build what's right for gamers. So, can you kind of you have again a much better viewpoint of No Man's Sky. Can you tell me how that all happened at Sony?
Sure. I mean, it started with, we were always looking for great independent studios to work with over the years. I remember my first time on stage at E3, I got to announce the Indy 9, right, where we had incredible people on stage. Tribute Games is on stage. We had Lauren Lanning on stage. We had Philippe from Outlast, from Red Barrels. That was such a cool moment. And we knew that we wanted to have sort of iconic independent development team. So, whether we're working with John Blow on The Witness. And so I had a previous relationship with Sean Murray and the Hello Games team from my days at Capcom when they made a game called Joe Danger, which I was a huge fan of. back in the day. And that was another one that got away when I was at Capcom. I really, really wanted to sign that, but they ended up, I think, doing a deal with they do PlayStation or their Xbox. I can't remember where that ended up being. But Sean and I were friendly, and it was a team that I believed in. And when they sort of told us the pitch and showed us some of the stuff, I'm like, that's very, very cool. I think the end result of what occurred in the sort of PR stuff, I think it's really it's a challenging situation because you're trying to talk about what your vision is. And I absolutely agree with you, Greg, that they delivered on it, right? It wasn't day one. Um, and I think it was a new era of um, talking about your product and being specific about what's there now and what's going to be there. I think if we look at Cyberpunk 2077, I mean, same thing. They at the gate they had some a little bit of bumps that they hit, but they absolutely crushed it. The game is phenomenal. So I think part of it too is like we need to take a beat and give people a little bit of grace. Sean Murray had not been on stage like Jack Tretton before. It wasn't a seasoned veteran, but he was a really, really smart guy, passionate guy that had an awesome team behind him. So sometimes I think you get in a situation where maybe there's some advice from PR teams saying like, oh, you should make sure you touch on this and touch on that and touch on this and touch on that. And I think being clear about your and consistent about your messaging and positioning is critically important. And I just think they got bit by the internet. I think the internet sometimes swings its tail and wants to take out some and I think in the games industry it happens a lot, right? The tail swings broadly and sharply. And so I feel really bad for them during that time because their intentions were sound. They want to make something cool that was different and new and unique. And they did deliver on that. It was not at the speed in which I think some people wanted it, but in the end they kept their promise, and I think that's the most important part. So I think whatever they're working on next, I'm super excited about because that they're people of the word and are going to deliver on it.
This was just a small piece of the conversation. There's a lot more at playerdriven.io. You can check it out. If you like this or get anything from this, please give us a like. It seems weird, but it really does help in a big way. We got to talk about kind of the games you grew up with your childhood. And what I loved the most about it was about learning from experience. You go and you become this armchair expert when you read a textbook, or even when you use AI, right? You become the greatest, most educated person on a certain matter of subject, on a certain subject. But the thing is, experience is so much more impactful and important when you do these things. You have done the ins and outs. You know what works and doesn't. And yes, it changes. But if you think about this world that becomes cyclical, right? How trends and things come back, you have to think about learning from your past and the mistakes that have been made. And you will fall into the same traps over again. But when you learn from experience, the ones that have come before you, you can build upon that, make it better, know what has worked and what hasn't worked. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.